Hello and welcome to the Culture Gym podcast. I'm Gareth Shackleton and I'm here with my co-host, Carly Richards. Hi Carly, how are you doing?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. Yeah, very well. Enjoying the fact that the sunshine's back with us today. It's been
I
away.
know that's true. Because we don't live in the same town, but the magic of technology, we can communicate. So it's sunny here too for me, which is good. It's nice.
Yeah. So it must be sunny everywhere then.
Well, hopefully, unless you might be listening to this in November or something, then not so much, maybe.
Quite true. It's like time travel, isn't it, doing this kind of thing? It could be any time.
We have to remember, people aren't necessarily tuning in live. They're not listening to us straight away. We have to, yeah.
What's wrong with them? They should be tuning in live.
But we can't brag about the sunshine in case it's winter when they are listening.
Fair enough. I'll remember for next time, for the next episode. So how's your week been?
My week has been pretty nice, actually. Taken a couple of days away from work. I've still been working, but just taken some time out to do things like we redecorated the office space, which was my kids' playroom and still is a little bit of a toy storage play area for them, but I've kind of moved in here now that everyone seems to be working from home. And actually, one of my major interests is to do with environment and working environment and the space that surrounds us when we work and the impact that that has on well-being and performance. So and all of that ties really nicely into culture. So this has been a bit of a what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the specific, but it's been something that I'm really keen to do and have been put my heart and soul into it, and it's taken a fair bit of planning to get it just the way that I want it, and everything's in its right space and things. Right, so yeah, that's been my week pretty much. What about you?
Good week, busy with clients as usual, but this week I submitted a manuscript to a scientific journal for publication. So that was quite exciting. I haven't done that for a few years, and it's taken me back to days gone by when that used to be what I did. So
yeah, that's really exciting.
It is. I've been working on the concept of bringing biochemistry into management, into the workplace as a tool. I think one of the things that we do that is becoming more and more important in sport and sports performance is monitoring an athlete's health and performance. And the only way to do that is through understanding their biochemistry. If they're getting the right nutrition, if they're getting enough sleep, if their exercise is at the right level, not too high, not too low, to titrate all of those things, the most objective way to do it is through biochemistry. And I just think it's about time we brought that level of detail into the workplace as well. So objectifying workplace performance through understanding and measuring people's biochemistry. Everything that we do, the environment, we're talking about environment there, the environment has an impact on our biochemistry. The food we eat, the water, our sleep, stress, all of this has an impact on biochemistry. So all of that should be reflected in our biochemistry, and then we can reflect that back to clients in terms of how work is affecting their performance and how to improve their performance as well.
Yeah, you and I have discussed this quite a bit, haven't we? I mean, you're certainly the expert in terms of biochemistry, but we've spoken about stress and well-being, and that's, I think, how we got onto you starting to do this massive piece of research in the first place. And because I was researching stress at the time, stress and well-being, and the impact that that has on us in the workplace. And so, yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to reading what you've put together, albeit, what is it, almost 7,000 words, you said?
It is. The body of the manuscript's about 7,000 words. It's quite an extensive literature review on the subject to bring together lots of, the state of the art, really. which isn't all that extensive because there aren't that many people working on it, but it's obviously 7,000 words. There's a reasonable amount.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I will look forward to reading that, Gareth. Well done, because that's a huge achievement.
Well, once it's accepted, that'll be a huge achievement.
It should be.
Yeah.
Of course it should. Of course it will be.
Indeed. So so that was the highlight of my week, I guess, is getting that submitted and on to the next stage. So
yeah, brilliant.
Space.
Very good. Yeah, well, as I say, other than just doing my home office, I've been chipping away at little projects and work projects. I shouldn't say little because they're all very exciting, like I said last week. Not quite ready to talk about a couple of them, but I'm sure I'll reveal all in the next few podcasts.
Well, now you're just teasing us.
I know. Well, to be honest, I won some funding for an idea of work project that I had, and I won some funding for that. And basically, it's just the development of that, and then coming into a bit of a transition period with other work projects that I'm not 100% sure which way they're going to go. So there's not really much point in talking about those ones yet either. And then So, and then the development of Culture Gym going into the future and how that might look and things like that with the backlash of the lockdown. So we'll see with that too. So
indeed. So talking of lockdown, we're the coming out of the other side of lockdown is progressing. Slowly but surely, where things are opening back up again, and people are getting back to work, and some level of normality is resuming. So I think the topic today that we is pertinent is about people going back to work, isn't it? And how that the challenges for some people in coming back to work, the challenges for businesses right now, and how these two things come together, and how culture affects that, and vice versa, how this situation may affect culture as well. So big topic for today's discussion.
Yeah, it's quite a wide topic, and I think for me, one thing that I would like to discuss and focus on is specifically the things that employers and employees should be aware of, things that will have changed, things that may have stayed the same, things that we are, all the baggage that basically employees are carrying as they come back to the workplace if they've been furloughed, or as they come back into an office space if they've been working from home, or indeed if they just are returning to some level of normality with, we're still working from home, but there's more people coming into our team, or things are progressing with work and what have you. So it's kind of a back to work, ongoing work situation, but just all the baggage that people are going to have, and employers as well. So one of the examples that I can give from a personal perspective as a parent, which a lot of us are, a lot of us aren't, but this is just my own experience. So yesterday, my son had a homeschooling piece of work that he was completing, because they're back to school, but not full time yet. So, and it was basically, what's your dream summer going to be? And he had to write, and it was a lovely project. And I kind of checked between the two kids, and I walked in halfway through when he was completing this piece of work, and I looked at it, and he sort of said, he typed out he wanted to basically spend more time with his family. And I thought, what? So I asked him about it without making him feel guilty at all for writing anything. It was how he was feeling, it was his experience, and I wanted to embrace that. So he explained that basically, because his dad, who has a really important job and has continued to work as a paramedic, looking after people throughout this whole situation, has been working an awful lot. And it's, I think because the kids are at home, they've recognized that more. Likewise, I'm at home, but I'm still working. And so I think lockdown, the impact of lockdown and the children being at home all of the time, my son is obviously witnessing us working, as dad leaving for work and me working in a space where I'm not always available. Well, I'm available, but not always kind of sitting beside them or playing a board game or, you know, all day long. And I think for a lot of parents, that kind of thing is going to be playing on their mind. How has this impacted my children? How will it impact my children as they go back to school in September? How am I going to occupy the kids when it's the summer holidays and they no longer have a homeschool routine? So there's lots and lots of issues to do with, for parents, to do with the kind of perhaps guilt, shame, because when my son said that yesterday, I can tell you I experienced mum guilt like I'd never experienced it before, and also a bit of shame. You know, I was thinking to myself, what am I doing to this kid when I'm working? But, you know, as you kind of process what's going on and you think, actually, my husband and I had a chat about it, and he said he loves being with his family, and that's a good thing. And he's just processing that, and we need to help him understand that, yes, we have to work, but him and his sister are the priority and what have you. So I think there's an awful lot of things going on for parents. There's an awful lot of things going on for anyone who isn't a parent as well, particularly if they have other family members that are relying on them, or they've been on their own for a really long time and they're not quite used to communicating all day, every day with people, and then they have to go back into this office. You know, there's so many issues that people have experienced, have gone through. Something as simple as, oh, I've gained a bit of extra lockdown weight and none of my work clothes fit me anymore, and I have to, you know, go out and buy, I don't know, new clothes, or I'm not feeling very comfortable, right through to I've lost a loved one, or we've lost a colleague due to the virus. And all of these things are going to have a huge impact, and things that employers need to be aware of, but also employees need to be aware of because of their colleagues, and be able to empathize as best they can with that, which is, you know, easier said than done. I suspect that from an employer's perspective, in an ideal world, they would want to be empathetic, and they would always see themselves as being a supportive employer. I would like to think. However, the reality can be quite different if that employer is under pressure from trying to get their business going again, and let's just get back to normal and let's just carry on where we left off, because we really, if an employer is so enthusiastic to make their business continue to be a success, then some of that empathy, with the best will in the world, could easily go by the wayside.
Yeah, indeed. It's a heady mix, isn't it, of the issues that employees are bringing back to the workplace, as you've described, and the fear as well, the fear of, can they keep social distancing as they're back at work, and particularly if they have people at home or that they're caring for who are vulnerable. You know, the coronavirus is still around, although at a much lower level, and there's inevitably that fear, you know, some of which has been created by the government's response to this. I mean, let's not get into the politics, but you know, that fear's there anyway. And then on the other side, you know, from the employer's point of view, they want everybody working at 100% efficiency, productivity, you know, 100% performance, talking about performance earlier, because there's a job to be done now. There's you know, it's survive and thrive time. Businesses, you know, had very little, some businesses anyway, have not been able to trade, or they've had to change their level of trade completely. And for many, the revenues went off a cliff at the start of the lockdown, and now they've got to make up for lost time and get the profits back. So they want everybody on that they bring back working at 100% productivity. But with all of these issues still in the background. So I think when it comes to culture, it's one of those moments of truth, isn't it, right now? You know, right now with this coming together of employees issues and the company issues, it's that moment of truth where you find out if your culture really is as good and as strong as you thought it was, and as supportive and as encouraging of people and of performance as you think it is.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. And I mean, it's going to be tough for a lot of companies. It's going to be hard for employers. It's going to be hard for employees. As we said last week, I think one of the main things to consider is communication, and some sort of, if you can, some sort of audit, or I mean, it's a technical term, but basically just check in. How have things been for you on an emotional level, on a personal level, have you had an appropriate space to work in? You know, I'm talking about me only just putting together some level of office space that I'm happy to work in at home at the minute. And I think for a lot of people, that will be the same. They'll struggle with their space that they've been working in. They'll struggle to get some peace and quiet if that's what they require to work in. So to then either return physically to work or continue to work from home and be expected or feel the pressure, even if their employer is not expecting it, feel the pressure to, I want my employer's company to succeed, therefore I'm under pressure to deliver. Pressure they put on themselves. I think this is a huge topic, and one that we should probably cover again as time goes on. Yeah. And we'll see how it develops. But I think the core message for me is for employers to be mindful of their empathy levels and keep that communication going as employees continue to come back to work. Also for employees to perhaps take some of that responsibility on themselves and try and maintain good practices to look after themselves, be it with their emotional well-being or their personal circumstances or their physical well-being as well, as best they can, so that they are in a better place to be going back to work.
Yeah.
I think those are the three key things for me: communication, employees taking responsibility, and empathy.
Yeah, I agree. I think you know, it might feel as though it takes a lot of time to do those things, but that time will be repaid in terms of the productivity that we're talking about, that every business needs now from its employees. Yeah. So you're spending that time as the leader, as the manager's responsibility to help employees to adjust is really important. And I think the other thing, you know, on top of those three things, is that time for reflection that a leader needs to take as well right now, in terms of, you know, thinking about, is our culture supportive of this situation, and is it helping or hindering the return to work? You know, having that time to sit and reflect and to see, you know, whether your values and your culture is supporting that. Because if it's not, it's an opportunity to change, adapt, or to be flexible. We were talking about adaptability last week, and you know, it's that opportunity through reflection to change things up a little bit. You can't do that if you don't take the time to stop and think and reflect.
Exactly. No, great points. Which leads, and bringing it back to culture, it leads us on to our question for this week, which is actually a really interesting question, as we had a little chat before we started this. So why don't you fire away with something you've been asked this week?
Yeah, thanks. I was asked by a client about how they can communicate their culture and their values to their employees without it making them cringe. So the emphasis was on being authentic, and you know, and there's lots of opportunities, lots of times when you need to be able to communicate that. You know, interview, induction are just two, but not least, you know, throughout, and reinforcing the culture and the values throughout every working day. So I thought it was a really interesting question. You know, how can they communicate this without cringing and for it to come across as authentic?
Yeah. So when you posed this question, my initial reaction was basically to ask the question, why do they feel so uncomfortable?
Yeah.
And once we can get to the bottom of that, what does that mean? Like, why? So because you and I both know that when you talk about your culture and you talk about your values as a business, you're essentially talking about, I've said this to you many a time, you're essentially talking about your business as a personality, who that business is and what it's about and what matters. And so to feel uncomfortable in saying that kind of thing, perhaps it's all to do with the language, and that's maybe what he meant, but I suspect it's something slightly deeper than that, and that he's either trying to portray a culture that isn't there, or he's perhaps trying to portray a culture that he really, really wants it to be, but isn't quite there. And there's a reason that feels uncomfortable. And the only reason that stands out a mile is because it's not who the business is.
Yeah, I think you're right. And, you know, I know this client a little bit better than you do. And there was definitely some element of that in there. And so there's areas there for us to work together on teasing that out and making sure that the values and their culture, as it's written, as it's described, is congruent with him, but also with the business. And then it will, you know, if it's congruent, then it won't make you cringe quite so much. So definitely agree with that. I think the other aspect is, and that can be looked at, is the idea that, you know, talking about ourselves can be uncomfortable for some people anyway.
Yeah.
Perhaps depending on their personality. And for a small business, you know, an SME, the personality of a business, the culture of a business is very much a reflection of the founders, particularly if they're still there. And so there's that element of, you know, if this is our values, and I'm talking about our values, what I'm actually talking about is me, what's important to me, and opening myself up, being vulnerable to my employees. And that will be harder if the values that you're talking about are not congruent with you. But it's also not an easy thing to do anyway, necessarily. Certainly for some personality types.
Yeah, I completely agree. Completely agree, because it's, for a small business, it could just be they don't feel comfortable in sharing who they are or what they're about, or perhaps it's also to do with the fact that they just don't feel comfortable in kind of being put on display, if you like, because there is an element when you're put on the spot and you're asked, so what is this about? I think you and I had a bit of a moment like that before we started the podcast, didn't we, where we were like, okay, so what are we saying, how are we going to introduce this, and who's going to talk first, and you know, and then there was a bit, and I said, no, you're just better at introducing things, we've started off that way, you just carry on because you're doing well. And then you were thinking about it too much and thinking, what am I going to say? And I think there's a little bit of that as well when it comes to an employer or a leader or a business owner being put on the spot and asked, what is it, what's your culture about, you know, what is it about your business? And so yeah, I agree. There could be two things going on. And I suppose for you, that's just about you getting to the bottom of that with your client, isn't it?
Well, and that's the coaching conversation then, isn't it? And that's where all of these things are teased out and dealt with and sorted through. So really interesting question, and a real good opportunity for some coaching and to help that, you know, the client and that business to move forward. It's great. I think it reminds me of the story of the millipede and the worm. Have you heard that story?
No, I don't think
listeners may have heard it. So a millipede and a worm in the garden, and they're moving towards each other, and the worm's looking at the millipede, and, you know, it's got these thoughts going through its head, whichever end of a worm is its head, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And so the worm stops the millipede and says, "How are you doing that?" And the millipede says, What am I doing?" He says, "All of those legs, and they're moving in perfect synchronization. They never trip each other up. They never get tangled. They just move in this wave through your body as you move forward through the garden." And the millipede stops and thinks, "I've no idea how I do it." And the worm says, "Oh, okay, well, I wish I knew, but never mind. I'll see you tomorrow." And the worm sets off in that direction, and the millipede sets off in the other direction, and immediately falls over, legs in a tangle, because he's trying to think about how he's doing it now.
Yeah, and it's not automatic.
Exactly. We do these things automatically, and
Yeah.
it works. If you have to think about it, it doesn't work anymore. And that's one of the challenges as well with writing down or being asked a question on the spot. What's your culture? What are your values? And you want it to come naturally without thinking about it.
Yeah.
But to do that, you've got to write it down first. But the very act of writing it down almost feels false and contrived, and you've got to go through that, get to the point where you've written it down, you've read it out loud several times, you've honed it, you've read it out loud again, until it does become natural just by that practicing.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, and that whole nature of practicing and it's habit forming at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And from there we could go into all sorts of discussions about neuroplasticity and all that stuff, which I find fascinating. But basically what you're saying is right. You need to become comfortable with it, and to do that, it's writing it down, it's practicing it, it's learning it, so that you're able to say, well, proudly, this is who we are, this is what we're about. But I think part of that process also is discussing it with your employees, no matter how big or small your team is, and making sure that they actually agree. Yeah. And that they are proud of that culture, and they're proud of those values, and they're proud of to work for the business and for the company and for the employer. Yeah. And that will no doubt help the whole process.
I agree. I think we've talked about the culture and the values of an organization, a small business, coming from the founders, the leaders, but and that's probably true, at least to begin with. But having that verified and discussing it and understanding what that means to your employees is an important way of you gaining understanding of it as well, because what they feed back to you in terms of what they see as the culture and helps you to understand those values in a completely different way.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree.
Very good. Well, I'm looking forward to talking about neuroplasticity in forthcoming episodes, and I hope our listeners are too.
Yeah, that's perhaps one for some sort of behavior change discussion in there somewhere. Yeah. Which is one of my favorites. So, yeah.
Sounds good. Can't wait.
I bet, yeah. I'm not quite sure if you're being sarcastic or if you're being
genuine. Me? Sarcastic? Never. No, I genuinely, if we're going to talk about that next week, that would be great. So,
well, maybe we can. We'll plan out what we're going to chat about next week. And also, if anyone has a specific topic, you can catch Gareth and I on LinkedIn. Or we're working on the website still. We're working on the social media channels. I believe that the videos are now up on YouTube as well. Is that true, Gareth? So we've got the podcast and YouTube.
Yep. At the moment, the links on YouTube are not very intuitive because of YouTube's rules about having, I think it's 10 videos uploaded before you can customize the URL to your company name. So
okay.
We'll have to wait.
Well, we better get cracking.
Give people a nice user-friendly URL to go and find.
Best get busy with the recordings then. Right.
But we're getting there. But yeah, if anybody's got a question they'd like to ask that we can feature on the show, then please leave a comment on the podcast page or on the YouTube page if you manage to find it. Or if you've got topics you'd like us to discuss, please leave a comment.
Yes, by all means.
We'd like to make
And
this as
we'll,
relevant as possible.
yeah, of course, it has to be relevant, and we want to be helping as many people as we possibly can too. So, and if anyone wants to get in touch about a work aspect, or wants a little bit of advice, or wants to pick our brains about anything, either as individuals or as a collective team, as part of Culture Gym, where we could support your organization or your company with its culture, any kind of culture change, any development, any renewed sense of culture that you may be wanting to experience going forward after the lockdown, then please get in touch. Our email address is
hello@culturegym.co.uk. Were you testing me?
Well, I kind of was testing you, but I was also testing myself to see, because I was going to go for hello@culturegym.co.uk, but then for some reason I also had in mind admin@culturegym, but it's not admin, it's hello. So hello@culturegym.co.uk. Yes, by all means get in touch. And
hello. Very good, excellent. Thanks, Carly. I think that's the end of another podcast, and look forward to next week's episode.
Yeah, week 3 done.
Week 3 done, in the can, as they say, or maybe they don't anymore.
No, I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah. Have a good week, everybody. Take care.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.